Hey everybody, this is Deanne. I'm an admin on the Trying to Conceive Naturally Facebook group. I am doing a video. I'm going to try to keep it short just because I have children and husbands and, well, just one husband, but they're downstairs and they're going to be hungry. So pardon the mess of a hair. I'm just trying to get this done because I've been promising it for a while. So, basically, when you are trying to conceive, you have a lot of different options, and everything gets really confusing for people. And now I have been through, unfortunately, about 18 months of trying to conceive. I have conceived 5 times in those 18 months, but several of the months were kind of a waste because I wasn't totally sure what I was doing. So I read several books about tracking your basal body temperature and doing OPKs and all that good stuff. And honestly, I was very resistant at first because I thought tracking my temperature every day, setting it, I don't like getting up in the morning as it is, so setting an alarm to take my temperature seemed like crazy. But here's the thing. Our bodies have signs to show us when we are fertile. And tracking our temperature is one of those things that is free once you buy the thermometer, and it's really easy. And it really, when people say that they're not going to temp and they're not going to track because it stresses them out and they're just going to BD, that's a great system. But the problem with that system is that I had several months where I didn't ovulate, and I have nothing hormonally, thyroid, nothing's wrong. Sometimes you just don't ovulate, and you need to know if you're not ovulating, because you're definitely not going to get pregnant if you're not ovulating. So there's that, and then there's also releasing the eggs too early and having too short of an LP, which is your luteal phase. So these are all things that you can find out by tracking your temperature. You can also find out if your progesterone is low because your temps wouldn't be that elevated after ovulation. There's a wealth of information from your body, and it's just a matter of creating a habit. 30 days to create a habit, and it becomes second nature. So I do not track during AF because my temperatures are erratic then, so there's no reason to for me. And hopefully that, I do recommend temping vaginally because a lot of people sleep with their mouth open. It's pretty common. And you are looking for your basal body temperature before you move around, before you jump out of the covers, before your feet hit the ground. I have found if my husband's alarm goes off at 4:30 and I lay there squiggling and playing games on my phone for like an hour, I've screwed my temperatures up. So if you have to get up before your regularly scheduled time for any reason, I do have a way to teach you to adjust for that. But the main thing is you're trying to get your lowest temperature, your resting temperature. That's your basal temperature. So I know a lot of times people try to resist and not get a basal thermometer. Go spend the $10 at CVS or Walgreens and get yourself a basal thermometer. You need the decimal points to the hundredths. Otherwise, you're not going to see enough of a curve. Will you see a little bit of a curve? Yeah. But if you're going to waste, I said waste. If you're going to spend the time doing this, do it correctly. So, I got a basal thermometer on Amazon, and this is the Easy at Home. It did not come with instructions, which I found to be completely frustrating because I really still to this day don't know if I'm using it correctly. But I do like it because it has a backlight, which when you're taking your temperature vaginally in the middle of the night, or even in the morning, it's still dark, and it's under the covers too, so this is really helpful. I'm sure other places make them, but this one's fine. It was like 25 bucks. You cannot, let's see, I want to try to stay on track here because there's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. But as I've said before, you cannot go pee and then take your temp. It will not work. I really recommend Fertility Friend. I have tried My Days, Glow, Ovia View, or OVQ, something of that nature. I've tried them all, and that one's actually closer to Fertility Friend. But the reason that we use Fertility Friend is there's features on there that some of the other ones just don't have. It does display an entire month of temperatures at the same time, and it has something called a chart overlay, which is why you're doing this. You're doing this so that you can see a historical curve, so that you can have an overlay and find your pattern. This particular feature allows you to put as many charts as you want on top of each other, and you can see the patterns. They're all different colors. It's really cool. So I'm a very big tightwad, and I pay the $25 a year for that service, because not only does it give you the chart overlay, it also has a pregnancy monitor to help figure out if you're possibly pregnant, which is just a score, but it's cool. It also has something called crosshairs, which is that the application actually detects when you've ovulated. What's easier than that? So, I'm not being paid by them. I just have used all the others, and some of them were wrong on my fertile days. They were not as user-friendly when it came to the actual chart itself. So I just recommend it. At any rate, when you put your temperature in every morning, one of the things that you can also do in the specifics category, you can check box what happened during the night. So if you had sleep disturbances, if you didn't get a lot of sleep, if you're really sleepy, you can mark all that, and it's going to throw some of your temps out if it's too crazy. But if it was just you woke up once at 3 a.m., you went pee, you got back to bed, you still had 3 hours of sleep because you got up at 7 or 8, you should still be accurate. On those days that you do get up a little bit early or a little bit late, there is whenmybaby.com has a basal temp adjuster, and in there it's basically adjusting you 0.1 for each hour that you oversleep or get up too early. I want to caution you not to use it that often, because eventually you're going to start to mess up your curve, because I don't think it's always true that it's exactly 0.1 every hour. So it is nice for, I sleep in on the weekends, and so I'll use that to be lazy, Okay, so the other things, I'm trying to look at the camera, I'm really terrible about that. I'm sorry about that. So people get really stressed about their pre-ovulation temps. Do not get stressed about your pre-ovulation temps. They do not matter. They are, when your body is experiencing a surge of estrogen, that's what happens before you ovulate. It will pull your temps down. That's what estrogen does. In fact, progesterone takes over when your egg is released, and sometimes we have what's called an estrogen fallback rise, which is essentially the estrogen kicks back in because there's a little bit left over, and it pulls your temps back down. Not a concern. No big deal. So what you are looking for when you are trying to track your ovulation is you are looking for a possible dip in temps right before you ovulate, which is the day you ovulate. And then the following day, a 0.2 to 0.5 increase in your temperatures. Now, sometimes, this is the beauty of Fertility Friend, it will find that for you, and it will give you crosshairs. But it waits until you have 3 days of high temps after to confirm it. And because I've had months where my progesterone just didn't really kick in right away, it took 4 or 5 days for me to get my crosshairs. So that's why we do this on an ongoing basis, to establish a pattern, and we don't rely on an app to tell us when we're releasing an egg. We rely on our body. So you can look for a dip, but what the nice thing about Fertility Friend is there's also a feature that will tell you, hey, last month you ovulated between cycle day 12 and cycle day 14, and because you got a positive OPK on cycle day 11, we think you're going to ovulate again on cycle day 12 through 14. So you can kind of, it's normal to fluctuate a little bit. It's not normal to have a 22-day cycle ever, and then a 38-day. So if you're within 5 or 6 days, that's okay. when we get stressed, we're not going to ovulate on time. So you just don't need to get stressed about your pre-O temps at all. Then when you see that 0.5 increase, and I always look for a 0.5, but I do a 0.5 increase, then you've probably ovulated and it's probably too late to catch the egg. There's always next month. I recommend, if you do not know when you ovulate, to start out doing baby dancing every other day from the end of ant flow until you're positive OPK, and then doing it another time or two for good luck. I've tried Clomid, which gave me ovarian cysts and caused me not to ovulate for 75 days, so I do not recommend Clomid. However, it does work for some people. It's a very easy way to jumpstart ovulation. I prefer Femera or soy isoflavones myself, but if you are using any kind of those items, you should not ovulate for at least 5 days after your last pill. So, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but really I think I've covered most of the basics on temping. So we'll kind of fly into OPKs. So OPKs are basically tracking that you have an LH surge. That does not mean that you ovulated. It means that the LH that is necessary for the egg to be released has surged. So once that takes place, then you should see either right around the same time, a little bit before or a little after, another little estrogen surge, and that's what actually releases the egg. So I actually do a Ferning microscope too, because as I've aged over the last couple months, my OPKs, I used to get a positive OPK and then 2 or 3 days later I would ovulate, or the next day. Very predictable, very nice. Well, now all of a sudden I ovulate whenever I feel like it, I guess. So, positive OPK now? Well, guess what? Ovulating 15 minutes later. So, I have also added the Ferning microscope in just because that gives me another layer of making sure I'm right. Some people have ovulation pains. I did not used to, but since I've started taking ovulation-inducing medications, I have started to have very bad ovulation pains, so that also helps, but not everyone has those. You should see an increase in your egg white cervical mucus. Not everyone has that. I do believe it's necessary to transport sperm. I did get pregnant twice before I was really using anything to help, but it's before I was using anything like a Clomid that dries you up too. So I think they kind of go together. Okay, so OPKs. So your test line needs to be as dark as or darker than your control line. This is a really hard concept for a lot of people to understand, and I always recommend not using cheap internet cheapies to do your OPKs, because for me, I didn't have enough LH in my system for those to even show up or work. But for a lot of people, they'll say things like, well, this is the most positive that mine gets because it's an internet cheapie. And so I wouldn't trust, to me, when you're 40, I'm on precious time right now, and I don't have time to waste on cheap OPKs that don't work. So, I don't spend money on the clear blue digitals. If you're taking any kind of inducing, so if you're taking an ovulation-inducing medication like Femera, which I like Femera, by the way, but I'm not going to take it anymore just because it's becoming too much, I think. But you have those medications, they are suppressing your estrogen so that the eggs have a longer time to mature, thus delaying ovulation until the eggs are ready. So, you wouldn't be able to use some of, like the advanced clear blue digital is going to give you high fertility for a long time while that estrogen's being suppressed. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor at all. I I read. I have probably read 10 or 15 different fertility books cover to cover.